Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has warned its supporters to stop verbal attacks against presidential hopeful Peter Obi, saying such attacks undermine opposition unity and do not serve the interests of Nigeria or its people. Atiku made the remark in an expose while relating to rising exchanges among supporters of opposition leaders. The former vice president added that such internal divisions within the opposition camp only benefited the ruling APC. Meanwhile, Umar Ado, convener of the League of Northern Democrats, said Obi did not stand a chance of getting the presidential ticket of the new opposition coalition, the African Democratic Congress ADC, ahead of the 2027 general election, unless Atiku stepped down. Joining us on this show to discuss if Atiku holds all the aces in the ADC ahead of other potential candidates like Peter Obi is Dr. Hakeem Baba-Ahmed, former presidential advisor to President Bola Tinubu on political matters. Good morning, Dr. Baba-Ahmed, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Hi. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning,
It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, Vimba is also here, our Niger wife. Okay, Dr. Baba-Ahmed, let me ask you, you are on record as having said, well, maybe it would be better for former Vice President Atiku Abubakar to step down. I saw a quote like that. Maybe you didn't say so. But what do you think are the prospects in the APC with Umar Ado, convener of the Northern League of Patriots, Democratic leaders, saying that, well, it's perhaps better for Peter Obi not to even worry about the ticket?
I think the comment that Dr. Ado made was not that Peter Obi shouldn't contest. The point he was making is that if you go through the conventional process of bringing out a candidate for a party, and that's a convention, not an anointing, not a handover, surrender to the ticket, Peter Obi is likely to lose. He used the word 100 times. I more or less agree with him. Vice President Atiku is head and shoulders better than all the other candidates in terms of emerging through a convention. Either he does this either through experience or he has wider spread, better structures and more loyal people. And he understands the mechanics of internal democratic politics, I think better than the others. I think Governor Peter Obi's people and himself are not helping his case. What he really needs to do, I think, is to go out and soil his boots. I think he's the most traveled politician I've seen in the recent time, and that's good for him. He tries to stay in touch with grassroots, which is good for him. But what he needs to do now is to really sit down with his people and come to terms with the fact that he's now running against hardline politicians who also have their eyes on the same thing that he has his eyes on. What Vice President Atiku did in terms of saying to his people, calm down, we don't want to start trading insults with each other, was the right thing. Peter Obi should do twice as much. I did a program 2-3 days ago where I mentioned the fact that Peter Obi would lose 100 conventions. You would be amazed at the number of people who commented and insulted me and said, oh, look at these people. How do they think Peter Obi will line up behind Atiku? I'm afraid in the democratic process, that's how it's done. You can have a consensus candidate, but you need to have the consensus of people like Atiku, maybe even Amechi, and maybe there are one or two dark horses who are working behind the scene. The point is that ADC's ticket is up for grabs, but it will be a very, very difficult task for anybody to get it other than President Atiku. So you have to choose. You can play your card and stay still within the party, but things like, if I don't get a ticket, I don't stay, or your supporters say, no, give him the ticket, convention or no convention, it has to be Obi. I think those things don't have a place in the democratic process.
Well, there are many things that don't have a place in the democratic process that we still see play out today. But you're absolutely correct. If the due process must be followed, convention must happen, and candidates must be elected, at least by party members. But let me listen, the ADC avoid an implosion that you've predicted in the event, that is, that Alhaji Atiku Abubakar emerges as a flag bearer? Because what the ADC is positioning itself to be is a viable opposition in the next elections. And you've identified an opportunity for them in your last interview, saying that based on the performance of the APC government, it might not be a clear road for them to emerge as winners in 2027. How can the ADC take advantage of this, despite the implosion you have, you're seeing ahead of time if anything happens, during the convention or after the convention? How can they consolidate? How can opposition parties like the ADC work together to present themselves as viable, alternatives come 2027?
Well, I'm beginning to sound like a broken record when I say the most important thing that ADC can do, and the single most important commitment that Vice President Atiku can make to this country in all his years of labor and strive to build a democratic process in this country is to decide not to run. You've got to do something that is so dramatically outside the box that Nigerians can sit up and say, these are not just another recycled politicians trying to replace Tinubu. And of all those things, it has to be something that Atiku would do. And one of them is not to keep insisting that he has to run. And I will give you my reasons. I'm not the most popular person for Atiku or his camp for saying this, but look at it. President Buhari ran for 8 years. He didn't run well. If he had, he would have mitigated the damage of all this business of, we must have 8 years, we must have 8 years. So President Atiku's, President Buhari's record is not exactly the best preparation to have another northerner and make a case only for the fact that the person comes from the north for him to be elected. Atiku may have a lot of voters in the north, but Buhari has also alienated a huge number of Nigerians from this idea that being from one part of the country bestows upon you a capacity or an instinct for good leadership. So that's going to be a problem. The second one is people would ask, well, what can somebody like President Atiku and the people around him offer different from what APC and President Tinubu are offering? There's very little, especially when you don't know. They need to come out and say exactly what they are going to do and say it in a manner that Nigerians consider and say, but we have an option to all this poverty. We have an option to all this insecurity. We have an option to all these quarrels about coming from one part of the country or coming where there are people who are saying, give us power and we can fix this country. So, but they haven't said so. And I think that they're shortchanging themselves because ADC is substantially outside this terrible danger where the party and a few other sensitive state agencies throw ropes around you and tie you up with litigation and internal frictions until the elections are virtually over. So ADC is in a strong ground. But what ADC is not doing is not playing its card right. What would you do with power? The third reason why I think President Atiku's sacrifice for the nation is the best thing they can do is that it will give him immense powers to decide what happens in ADC and send signals to the people who would be jockeying for positions that he actually calls the shots. Okay. If he makes that sacrifice, it gives him huge power. Now, he doesn't become president, but he can decide who becomes president.
All right. So let's look at this scenario and delve deeper into it. If you have an Atiku stepping aside, so to speak, then in your opinion, what is the winning ticket? Is it the Obi Kwankwanso ticket that some people have been putting forward? And in all of this, do you think we are being a little bit too rash in dismissing the ambitions of Rotimi Amechi, who has been seen doing several engagements, especially in the north with various groups there, and many people are alleging that he's trying to re-engage the late President Buhari's base, so to speak. What's the winning ticket? And Amechi, is he the underrated underdog who might just emerge whilst the focus is on, Atiku and Obi?
Okay, we are now proceeding on the assumption that the impossible happens. That President Atiku says, okay, I give up my ambition to be president. So let's look at those who are clamoring to fly the ticket. You can settle the issue of who flies the flag even before the convention, but you need to go through the formalities of a convention. You have, and you should mention Rufai as well, even though he says his hat is not in the ring. But so you have Obi, you have Kwankwaso, if he does come in, because Kwankwaso hasn't, I'm not sure how much Kwankwaso has committed yet to the ADC, but let's assume he's there. Amechi is there, Rufai is there, the former governor of Osun State is there. There are quite a number of Nigerians who have fairly credible records of having held power and quite possibly could offer leadership. Then President Atiku could say, our best hope, for instance, is to say, why don't we produce an Igbo president? Obi is with us. If we combine his huge popularity with the Southeast and Igbo people, and the huge number of votes that he got in the North, largely because of, I think, the religious element was prominent in the manner people responded in 2023. And then we go out to the country and say, let's try an Igbo president, elected Igbo president, because he's good, not just because he's Igbo president, because he has credible record as governor, and because if we do this, it will certainly be the catalyst for the defeat of APC. That's the kind of things that will go for an Igbo presidency. If it's not going to be Obi, then you have to look for somebody from the Southwest, good enough to provide a competition to President Tinubu in the Southwest and in other parts of the country, and say it doesn't have to be a northerner who will take over from Tinubu, but we have somebody from the Southwest, someone who will do incredibly better than this presidency, which is allowing the country to drift and to sink deeper into insecurity and poverty and division. And so that you then have to look for a good person. Amechi would also have his own power base. He can be prepared to be sold to the rest of the country. His drawback would be that he was so closely aligned with Buhari. A lot of people will smell Buhari every time he passes by. So that's going to be his limitation. There is Tambol.
The combination. I understand all these people are throwing their can potentially throw their hat in the ring. But the combination, the presidential, vice presidential ticket for you that you think will really sweep the belly. What is the two names, please? Presidential, vice presidential candidates for ADC, all things being equal.
The one factor we haven't mentioned is this rather unfortunate but pervasive idea that there must be two terms for someone from the southern part of the country. If it's not Tinubu, it must be a southerner. And amazingly, it appears to have taken place. Taken its position in the mentality of our people. The North should not take the next 4 years. As if you have a northern candidate, it's entire northerners who are running. Because you asked, I'm responding in this manner, because you asked the question about the number one and the number two. You can have a number one from the northern part of the country if it's the choice of the party and is good enough to be sold to the country, not only to the north, but to the rest of the country. And then you can have somebody who's, who run as his second, but he must also bring on board a huge number of southern votes.
Dr. Baba-Ahmed,
and if you do that...
Dr. Baba-Ahmed,
yes.
let's save time.
Yes.
You are evading Vimba's question. She's asking you specifically to say, on the platform of the ADC, this is the ticket you would prefer. Are you going to say, oh, Atiku Peter Obi, Obi Kwankwanso, or Obi Nasir Rufai? That's what we want, not all these permutations about if you have somebody from here, you have somebody. We wanted to hear your own choice, what you recommend. However, we've been talking about ADC. I'd like us to talk about APC, the main opposition party. Now, this week, I wrote on a subject saying that, look, Hakeem Shettima, Senator Hakeem Shettima, is very important to the ticket, and all this controversy that it should be dropped would seem not to make sense. I gave my reasons. I don't want to repeat what I wrote. This morning, we discussed the chairman of the APC, Netanwe Twada, saying that you have to be a member of APC for you to get a position. And even if you are a technocrat, given a position one way or the other, you must also become partisan. How does that work for diversity and for inclusivity and for competence in terms of how we choose those who lead us, so that we don't end up again in 2027 with motor-packed outs, you know, who are on their way to getting a GCON?
Well, let's take the last point, Dr. Abati. I think that you're an expert on bringing in non-politicians. You worked with President Jonathan, unless I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you worked with him in a very sensitive position. And I know 2 or 3 excellent non-party people who came in to work for him. One of them was Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, my former minister in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, an excellent Nigerian with excellent credentials. She didn't just come in as Minister of Finance. She came in as the coordinating minister of the Ministry of Finance. And that was one of the most frustrated people I've seen. She ended up throwing up her hands and saying, oh, they've finished all the funds being set aside by the rainy day governors come in and say, oh, why are we saving money when we have needs? Basically, she was there when the Jonathan administration ran the economy aground. Being part of that administration, I'm not too sure you would agree with me. But anyway, I use that as an example. I know, I knew you would not agree with me, but let's agree to disagree. The point you raised is, does it make any sense, the comments of the chairman of the APC, that you can have a government as complex as the federal government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, made up purely of politicians or technocrats turned politicians? I was just one of those people in Las Vegas. I almost thought, I hope these guys are not using me as an example. I went in there as a non-political person. I actually have my own party. They knew I am a member of the party, People's Redemption Party, PRP. But anyway, they appointed me there. I went in there. Midway through, or a little bit before midway through, I walked out because I didn't see any value in being there. You have a huge number of excellent people, even as we speak, excellent, well-placed to make massive inputs into policy making, policy management, policy implementation, but they don't get involved. So sometimes I ask some of our colleagues, I used to ask some of them, what the hell are we doing here? We formed cliques, we broke ourselves up. So having a technocrat in government in itself is not necessarily a guarantee that they would use you. So, but it's inconceivable what he's suggesting. If you are going to come into our party, you have to have a party card, you have to show levels of loyalty consistent with our need. How do you run a country made up entirely of politicians? And even more worrying, now we understand why the APC is so desperate to gobble up and eat up every politician. They think that if they corner all the politicians on their corner, on their side, they will win this election in 2027, and they're making a terrible strategic mistake. You can pocket every politician in this country and still lose an election because they are not performing well. Now, regarding Shettima, I have to say this for a minute. Kashim Shettima is an excellent Nigerian, one of the most intelligent people I knew and worked with. Loyal beyond questioning. He is a victim of geopolitics. There are people who think the Muslim ticket needs to be replaced. You need to go for a second term with a Muslim-Christian candidate so that you can now bring on board the Christian element. And they keep missing the point. Actually, the truth was that the Muslim ticket has not worked for the Muslims. On the contrary, it has assuaged the concerns of the non-Muslims who thought, oh my God, if we have two presidents and a vice president and a president praying 5 times a day, we are in trouble. Christians are in trouble in this country. They are not in trouble. They were not put in trouble. And on the contrary, they got many concessions that the Muslims in this country didn't get, largely because there was really no substantial difference between having a running mate who's I'm a vice president. He was marginalized. He has been made virtually redundant by President Tinubu. I don't know whether it is because he's a Muslim or whether they have issues, but I think they are not utilizing an excellent vice president in the manner they should. They have massive problems in the north. What they need to do, really, is to use people like Shettima to say, help us to fix the north. But they are not doing that. On the contrary, they're just bringing in governors and bringing in governors and bringing in governors and senators and members of the House of Reps. And they're thinking on 5 weeks to the elections, 10 weeks to the elections, it is these people who can't even face their citizens or their people who voted, who are going to go on the street and tell Nigerians to vote for them, unless they are not planning to have a real election. APC strategy is fundamentally flawed. But that's the way they want to go. And
all right. Okay, thank you so much. So you mentioned something that I think is quite important, and maybe you might just be able to give professor suggestions to the ruling party around being able to engender goodwill in the north. You say that they are not maximizing the potential of having Senator Kashim Shettima as vice president to consolidate the base in the north, particularly at a point whereby there are whispers in some corners, in some instances even loud, around the north feeling marginalized by this administration. Do you agree with that? That's the first question. And the second part is, if you do, what can this administration do better to get that northern support beyond their governors, but actually the people in the states to see that this government is working for them? And then also, you also talked about the opposition not preferring solutions, but they might disagree because almost every other day, Mr. Peter Obi, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar are releasing statements based on the prevailing economic security situation in the country, and in some of those statements actually give alternative solutions. Case in point, what's happened in Kaduna State, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar has said it today in the reports that he himself would negotiate. He said he wouldn't take negotiations to end violence off the table. He would be more proactive rather than reactive. So they actually do give, identify the issues and give solutions or what they would do differently if they were president. What do you make of this? Because in your last statement, you said they were not taking, using the opportunity to give an alternative as opposition members.
Well, let's take the last point you made. Releasing press statements every once in a while when something happens is not defining what you're going to do with the country. It is just simply routine critique of the opposition. Every time the government puts its foot wrong, you get somebody to write a beautiful statement that says, oh, this was the wrong way to have done this. What I meant was basically that ADC is operating in an environment where it genuinely has to say what it will do different from what APC is doing. Study APC, where are its limitations, how are they showing, and what will you do to fix them? It hasn't done that. I haven't seen a single document, manifesto, policy statement, not press releases, for goodness sake. I'm talking about, for instance, take security. Should this country look at options as credible options? You hinted that Vice President Atiku says he will not take it off, but expand it. The people in Katsina, in Kaduna, in Sokoto, in Kebbi, in Zamfara, in Niger State, in huge part in Borno, in Yobe, in many parts of for the last 10, 15 years, we've been running away from killers of all types. Of all types. What is the ADC going to do in specific terms that differs radically from what APC is doing and it looks likely to be a solution? Is our military losing a war we've been fighting since quite possibly 2011? What do we do with these bandits? Do we simply continue chasing them while we kill a few of them and then they take over villages and our people are living literally in many parts of the north, living under bandits or conditions with that bandits loot? Take the issue of poverty. It is a very, very serious issue. What are you going to do about it? The management of the economy, you hear about all these statistics and all these improvements being released in the ministries and agencies of the government, and yet they don't translate on how many millions of children are living with malnourishment, how many families go to bed with an empty stomach, how many people are roaming the streets with nothing to do. These are the kind of things that you think a party prepared to replace the APC should be doing. Preparing a document or a publicity strategy that will say to Nigerians, hey, look at us. We can actually fix Nigeria. But they're not doing that. They are busy. 80% of their energy is targeted against each other. APC's energy is targeted at winning the next election, not preparing the people to vote for them. They are so sure with all these politicians in their room, they can literally walk into power. So who's looking after the country? No one. No one. Not the government, not the opposition. That's why we're in such trouble. And that's why, for instance, Americans will look at us and say, oh, the country belongs to politicians or to religious jingoists. We need to fix them. Now, the issue about Shettima, you asked if the APC is in trouble in the north. Yes, they are. They are not just in trouble in the north. They are in trouble everywhere. I don't think they understand that. Because when you read the press releases, which is 80% of how they engage the rest of the country, you really shake your head and you wonder how extensively the people who write these reports or briefs, how extensively they travel. If in a place like Kaduna, a church was raided, they took away I don't play numbers games, but they took away a large number of people. Then the immediate reaction of both the federal government and initially the state government, even the local government channels say, no, nothing of such happened. For goodness sake, what do you want people to think? That either you don't exist in the same country as we do, or you don't care. And I listened to the comments made, and I commend you guys for those comments. It was a horrible thing. I'm very happy that the Governor of Asani retracted and said, no, it did happen. But these are examples of a government not on the ground. They don't understand the poverty, the damage that poverty is doing in the country. They don't understand how citizens who are chased away from villages feel about what it is to live in a country where you can't, as soon as you put your load down, they will tell you they're still coming after you and you're running. In the whole Southwest, in the entire Southwest, there's not a single internally displaced camp. Not because the people don't need it. They roam the streets. But because neither the state nor the federal governments have thought it is important to put places where some of the people have been displaced in Katsina, in Kaduna, in Zamfara, settle these people down. They are Nigerians. They used to farm and live in decent homes and look after their families. Put them in one place. Nobody wants to do that. And the reason why they don't want to do that is because IDPs magnify or show in graphic terms the number of people who have been displaced by criminals and bandits. And these are the kind of things I'm suggesting should be done in the northern part of the country.
Okay, Doctor.
Shettima is very good at doing these kind of things.
Okay, Doctor, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for joining us on The Morning Show.